Two. And we're live. Welcome everyone to another live stream about Legend in the Mist RPG, the rustic fantasy tabletop RPG currently being kickstarted by Son of Oak Game Studio. I'm MC Kevin Carpenter, and joining me today is the founder of Son of Oak, Amit Moshe, and today we are going to be talking about building challenges within this upcoming game. Amit, how are you doing today?
Yes, I'm doing great. Kevin, how's it going? Great to be with you again. Great to be with everyone. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you again for this amazing Kickstarter and how kind of a huge vote of confidence that you've given us to create this rustic fantasy RPG that we think you're just going to love. And we're going to take a deep dive into the challenges section and also a little bit of the lore. And we have some really great things prepared for today.
Yeah, so
Um,
so Amit,
yeah, what do you think? How are we going to start?
So like last time, by the way, if you haven't seen our previous live streams, we had one live stream talking about Legend in the Mist just in general, an AMA live stream, and another live stream where we did an actual play and also talked about creating characters within Legend in the Mist. I might be mixing up the subjects there, but anyway, check out our previous live streams. But in a similar vein to our character creation live stream, we set out options on the Legend in the Mist Kickstarter page of challenges that you would like us to build for this live stream. And Meet, you have been the one that's sort of looking at what subjects people have chosen, what challenges that they would like to see. On today's live stream, we're going to be focusing on a mundane challenge, a creature of twilight challenge, and
Yeah.
also a not a, not, what was the term for it? A landscape challenge, a travel
Yeah,
challenge?
kind of like travel, traversable land, something like that, something that you can just cross and the journey challenge basically.
Hmm. Journey challenge. I love it. So, yeah, I think the reins are all yours, Amit. Which challenge do you want to start out with?
Well, I think we'll probably just start talking about challenges in generally a little bit, just to get everybody on board and kind of understanding what this is all about. So
Mm,
Legend in the Mist works quite differently from other games in the sense that challenges don't use at all the same qualities um, as other characters do. They have a little bit of a different way of acting in the game and a little bit of different rules. The main way for challenges to act in Legend in the Mist is through threats and consequences. So Legend in the Mist works with the established player action and consequences kind of flow or basic loop. And during the established phase is when the MC makes threats with their challenges. And during the consequences phase, if the action generated consequences or if the threat was ignored, then you get to deliver consequences. These are the two basic actions that challenges have. So maybe if I could share my screen a little bit, we can start looking at some challenges. And then from there, we will start doing our build of different challenges. So if you guys are joining us now, this is a stream about challenges. I just shared my screen here. Um, the MC side of Legend in the Mist. We're going to talk a little bit about what are challenges, how to build challenges. We're going to build a few challenges, and then we're going to also answer some questions if you have them about how this all works. Um, and the whole idea with the challenges is just to really make things easy for the MC to help all of you have a really interesting experience, narrative experience. So you're going to see that the narrative focus here is definitely front and center, but also they're supposed to be really easy to create on the fly. And today, that's one thing we're going to show how we kind of very easily create a challenge. If you have an idea for a scene or something that your players are encountering in the wilderness or anywhere in the Dales or beyond, or if you're playing with your own setting, You can very quickly create challenges. Some people like to prepare in advance. Some people like to do it on the spot, and we'll see both of these things.
So before we get into the weeds of challenge creation, two things. First off, the Corvin Thaumaturge there, that art, it's from Daniel, right? Daniel Pinel or Pinel?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I love that art. That's only my favorite piece of art from Legend of the Mist by far. There's just a
Yeah.
lot
Me
going
too.
on in it. I very much appreciate it. But the
Yeah.
second thing, from Maya W in the chat, will these challenge creations work the same way in Otherscape?
Yes. Challenge creation will be quite similar in Otherscape, where there could be specific elements that are a little different, but generally you'll see the same. It's going to be the same as Otherscape. It's the same engine, and the core works in the same way.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So, do we have other questions
Not
before we dive in?
Nope, just a lot of faces, both familiar and unfamiliar, being excited about catching the stream live.
Yeah. So, welcome everyone, all the veterans and all the new joiners on the journey. Let's dive in.
Alrighty.
So, like I said, challenges are meant to be, first of all, a way for us to publish content that you'll be able to use very easily. That just like the character sheet, the MC doesn't have to read a lot of text to understand how the challenge works. Each challenge is really anything that can stand in the way of your PCs in a scene or endanger them or endanger their agenda, even if it's something comical. Um, so we can look at a little bit of types of challenges that are written here. This is the Tinderbox demo. So you can just download that from the Kickstarter page, or maybe Kevin can, if you have access to the link, maybe we can drop that in the chat. And as a part of this, we talk about concept types of challenges and the threats and consequences they create. So this part is probably, in all likelihood, going to be in your MC screen if you're playing, Otherscape or Legend of the Mist. And here in Legend of the Mist, we can see that we've kind of tweaked it a little bit for the fantasy genre. We have an attacker, someone who wants to hurt the PCs physically, mentally, socially, etc. We have a barrier or a hazard, a charge, which is someone or something that the PCs must defend from other forces. That's also a challenge, right? Someone who's squishy and is going to die if you don't protect them. A countdown is a process or something that is ongoing and is going to eventually lead to some crescendo. For example, a house on fire that's about to collapse. A mystery is something that people have to, the PCs have to find out, of course. A pursuer and a quarry are the two sides of the same coin. Someone who's chasing the PCs down, or someone who is the PCs need to chase down. A temptation is someone that's trying to get the pieces to act in a certain way. And a watcher is, like a guard, someone that, whether it's a spell or a magical effect or a person or a beast or anything that is kind of watching what the pieces are doing and could change the plot if they find out what the pieces are doing. So these are the types we have here, and each one of them has specific threats and consequences. So we're going to dive into building a challenge profile. These cards are called challenge profiles. Not every challenge has to have them. This is something that I just want to start, right off the bat and say, these are for what we call track challenges, tracked actions. We talked about it in the other streams, and we're going to talk about it here again. There are two options of player actions in the game. You can take a quick action that's more narrative, with just kind of like answers the question of, was it successful and what was the price? And you can take a tracked action, which starts tweaking with the numbers. You spend your power to deliver statuses and tags and change the game in a more mechanical way. Usually, challenge profiles are needed when you want to create something that will be more tracked. But we'll see how they actually hold within them a lot of little challenges that can be resolved with a quick action. So, Kevin, do we have any comments, any questions that we want to tackle at this point? Or the audience, if you have any questions that are coming up at this point about character profiles versus all challenges in the game, by all means, share them with us.
Brian Legg says that as you were going over the different types of challenges, Brian Legg sees Legend in the Mist as a temptation challenge, which I think is very fun.
Cool. The only thing is that it's not going to hinder your agenda, so don't worry about it. It definitely aligns with all the agendas of all the players that are in this community, and we're so happy to see people enjoying it. Speaking of which, we're also running a demo week at Start Playing Games. So if you go to the Kickstarter, check our updates. You can actually experience playing this or even run this if you want um, at Start Playing Games this week. So,
And speaking of the community, if you want to join a place where you can talk about both Legend in the Mist, as well as Otherscape and City of Mist and everything Son of Oak, or just talk about whatever you want, we do have an off-topic channel. Feel free to check out the City of Mist Discord, which I have just put into the chat.
absolutely join us there. We love this community. We love hanging out there. We love what people are creating there. There's some really interesting things coming out of there for Legend in the Mist, like a character sheet already, and it's really beautiful. Okay, let's dive in. Let's dive into our challenges. We're going to be building challenge profiles for track challenges, challenges that, are narratively the center of a scene or a central piece of the scene, and it takes more than one action to beat them. If a challenge is something that you can just, for example, uh, some kind of a thug that is standing or a bandit that is standing outside of a tavern and isn't letting anyone in, and the whole of the challenge is just about getting through them, and it's a very simple, quick action thing. You don't actually need the entire challenge profile. But we're going to dive into challenges that are a little bit more complex than that. Let's take a look for a second at what that entails. So in a challenge, we have basically four sections. We have the limits, which define what tier of status your players will need to impose on the status in order to vanquish it. So status is run from, or to overcome it. Status is run from 1 to 6 in tier. So it can be, the limit can also be from 1 to 6. Once the challenge takes a status from your PCs, or from itself, by the way, sometimes, that meets or exceeds one of those limits, it is defeated by that way, in that way. So this Corvan Thaumaturge, you can wound them, but you'll have to spend a lot of points to do that. The highest status tier, you'll have to reach wounded 6 in order to beat them by fighting them, by hurting them. You can befriend them, but that's not easy either. They're not really easily befriended. You also have to reach tier 6. And it also has a status that is used as a counter, which we'll reach later. And that's basically counting how many crows the Corvine Thaumaturge has around them. But we'll get back to that later.
Real quick, let's see. John Frameth asks, are challenges limited to a maximum tier size of 6, like Legend in the Mist PCs?
Yes, they are limited to a maximum tier size of 6. If you want to create defenses that will make things harder to take down or to overcome than 6, there's a lot of other ways of doing that. But the most basic one is just giving them a defensive tag or status, which immediately makes them harder to defeat. So, for example, let's take a look at the Corvan Thaumaturge defenses. Yes, it has a very high limit, but it also has a warded 3 status. And statuses affect all actions. Statuses are there to affect player actions, first and foremost. There aren't really actions that statuses can affect for the challenges themselves. There's the consequences, and sometimes statuses help players mitigate consequences. But at the end of the day, the challenge statuses are there to affect player action. And when you have a status like warded 3, which means magically protected 3, it means that every time a player tries to attack this character, they lose 3 powers right off the bat if they haven't somehow either circumvented or reduced this ward status before they attack. So losing 3 powers is a big deal. It means that even if you have a power of 4, you can only deal 1 wound every time. If yes, you can reach more than a power of 4, but it means you need to pull a lot of your resources to do that. So this is one of those things. It even has a special feature that adds additional protections, but we won't dive into that right now.
Another thing
Um,
with tags and statuses that belong to challenges is that they aren't always detrimental to the players. Sometimes, these challenges will have tags like, for example, slow 1, or it's like if you're running away from them, that slow status actually helps the players. So, all tags and statuses that challenges have don't always have to be detrimental to the players, as I said.
Absolutely. They can describe all kinds of things. We can take a look at the Wakened Sentry danger here that has shambling, and we use that to kind of help. I think it was the Apple Picker in our first stream. The Apple
Hmm.
Picker used this to, or was it in the in-action video? The Apple Picker uses this to actually topple down or bring down the Wakened Sentry. So yes, your tags and statuses describe different things, some of them good, some of them bad. Some of them can change, right? Maybe if dead flesh is something that for most people is probably harder to hack through, but maybe if there's a thaumaturge in the party who's a necromancer, dead flesh becomes like, okay, this is my thing. I can control this. And it becomes a positive tag in that situation. So it's very, very flexible.
Of any kind of game
Um,
where it's like dead flesh, this works in my favor now.
of course,
It's my time to shine.
it can go either way. Absolutely. If you're a necromancer and you love that dead flesh, this is the game for you. So we talked about limits, how a challenge can be overcome. We talked about tags and statuses. Tags and statuses are kind of the easy way to add features to challenges, and just by naming it, and then it's when you build a challenge, you want to think about how much these things add up and affect the power of the players, and more also in addition to that, you want to think about what kind of actions is this tag going to affect. So shambling means that it's kind of unsteady. Maybe we should have used unsteady, but I like the idea of a shambling Wakened Sentry. Dead flesh can affect attacks by making them weaker. Um, the fact that the challenge for Willow starts here with Petrified 1 means that it's not so easy to get Willow to move out of the way in the first scene of the Tinderbox adventure, and so on. So these are kind of like the easy way to affect your player character's actions, and in other words, determine the difficulty level of this challenge. Um, so that's tags and statuses.
So, an interesting question from Brooks Boyd in the chat. How is it
Huh.
annotated within an NPC sheet how long each status lasts? Does that warded 3 status, for example, last until a consequence removes a status?
Yes, so statuses, in previous iterations of the game, in City of Mist, we dabbled a lot with different durations. In this new iteration of the engine, we actually realized that narrative duration is the best solution to this problem. Instead of adding a lot of layers of complexity, we're just actually keeping it simple and letting the MC decide when things expire. At the end of the day, the challenge is not here to create a very kind of scripted experience. It's here for you to have an open-ended narrative experience. So you can decide that warding is going to expire at some point, but generally, if there's no text around it or no explanation around it, it remains for the scene.
Hmm.
Okay.
That does
Yes.
also.
Yeah.
That
Go
does
ahead.
also become a major strategy during conflicts with these challenges. It's, let's say you're fighting something with an armored 2 status and that keeps getting in the way of you trying to hit them, then a strategy during the conflict could be, how do we get rid of this status?
Right. And it's not always so easy, right? Because maybe you don't have anything to strip someone of their armor, especially if you're playing at a low power level. It's just not going to work. Maybe you have an attack that could circumvent armor. That's going to be a little hard.
Hmm.
But you definitely need some kind of spell to melt off their armor if you want to touch that status. So it's not so easy as to just take an action and remove the status. You have to have the narrative tools to do it. Okay. Same goes for the warded. You can't just remove the warded unless you're a thaumaturge yourself. So it gets really interesting, but at the same time, it's super simple to create. It's just a word with a number or just a word if it's a tag. And then we kind of get to the heart of the challenge profile, which is threats and consequences. Um, these are pairs of things that you announce during the established phase and consequences that you can deliver in the consequences phase. These pairings are only a suggestion. They're only a recommendation. Actually, you can use each one of them with each and every one of them if it works and if it makes sense. And you can also deliver consequences independently of their threats. You don't have to threaten or make an exact threat in order to deliver a consequence. And the way that this can happen is, for example, you did not make a threat, and then the player rolls 6 or less, creating consequences, or 7 to 9, which also creates consequences, and you decide to deliver a sudden blow with this challenge. You can use any one of the consequences that are here. So let's take a look at a couple of this. This is a very powerful challenge. We can see that the rating here is 5, which means that we think it's actually quite challenging to deal with. It has quite strong defenses, and it's kind of hard to bring down. And it also has some tier 4 statuses that it delivers in its consequences. So it could be hard to face. It's also quite kind of a short version of this core van thaumaturge. They have a lot more that they can do. Let's take a look at some of the threats and consequences. So this thaumaturge can take interest in rumors of an item of power. They're obsessed with, increasing their power as a thaumaturge. And if someone talks about this around them, then you can, in the next established phase, you can say, take interest in rumors of an, this person is taking interest in these rumors. As a consequence, they could actually, you can reveal that they learned something. They already know it. It's too late to hide it. So this is kind of a watcher element inside of this attacker challenge, where the consequence is that something that the player characters maybe should have kept secret or wanted to keep secret is revealed. So it's a narrative complication. It could be bristle. It could bristle or be frustrated by the conversation. This is a very powerful person. They don't have time for little villagers, running around the countryside. And if they do get annoyed, if there's consequences that they get annoyed, they can put a spell of paralysis on any number of companions. Anyone in the party can become paralyzed for. They can direct their murders, their murder of crows to attack. Many crows assail the target, and it's bleeding 4. It takes bleeding 4. This is a classic attack. It's kind of saying something like, points at someone in a flurry, a murder of crows is flying at that person. And if nobody does anything about it during the player action, then this hits. And it can hold the head of a paralyzed foe back and then steal a shiny morsel of life force. This is more of this could have been a status, but this is designed more as a narrative consequence. Maybe someone is paralyzed, one of the companions is paralyzed. It takes its head back, and if nobody stops the thaumaturge, it just draws out a little shiny morsel of life force out of that person. And of course, the usual getaway consequence. It could start growing black feathers on their face, and if nothing is done to stop them, they transform into a crow and fly away, ending the encounter maybe before the PCs got what they wanted out of it.
And this is
So this is
also,
kind of
oh,
the rhythm. Yeah.
and this is the challenge profile of a a person from a game that's currently in development. So this could also change upon the final release.
Absolutely. This is it's almost like a sketch of what this could be. And we can take a look at things that are probably a little more play tested. The first adventure is quite more play tested. And we can take, for example, rather than Sorobomb, a classic monster, the poison worm. You can hurt it, you can cleanse it if you have the ability to do that. It has a tag, mighty, which adds to a lot of its, physical actions. Oh, or it could also reduce from attacks against it. That's up to you. But um, if you are familiar with the complete engine, it can't actually do both. There's no double dipping. You can't affect both a PC's action and their mitigation later. It's a swimmer, so everything underwater gets a big plus. And then the threats and consequences could be a long shadow swims around in the murky water. This is a general threat that could be followed by any one of those consequences, or even just a consequence of suddenly seeing this creature. It can coil and turn so as to strike again, and then snap its jaws and fangs on a diver's limb, and so on and so on. So let's kind of talk about other questions that people might have about how this operates in the game, and then we're going to dive into how we build these things. So if you have any questions, please share them with us.
I'm gonna be honest, there have been people posting questions in the chat that some very helpful members of our community have been answering while we've been talking.
Oh, isn't that
Really
great?
appreciate how supportive this community is. Let's see. Just a real quick one from Brian. I'm gonna keep mispronouncing last names on every live stream. So if I mispronounce your
That's
name, I
how it works.
apologize. It's how it works. I'm reading all of these. Uh, Brian Lug, when the players get these statuses from the challenges, does this now hinder the players' rolls, or it's only when it reaches tier 5 or 6? So when players get statuses, most of the time they do affect their rolls in roles where the status is relevant. So, for example, if you get stabbed in the leg and get stabbed in the leg 3, then anything that requires like running around or like direct combat where you're moving your legs or anything that involves your leg is that status is going to hinder your roll. But if you get stabbed in the leg and then you try to negotiate with the person that stabbed you in the leg, well, that's not affecting your ability to speech, so more than likely that status wouldn't come into play. So it's another thing to think about. But yes, statuses from every tier from 1 to 5, actually 1 to 6 technically can affect your roll. It's
Mm.
disingenuous to say tier 6 because tier 6, once you get a tier 6 status, you're just out. If you get stabbed in the leg 6, you're dead. Like you're just or you're
Well,
unconscious
you either
or yeah.
bled out or you become permanently limp. You get a permanent limp or a permanent, disability or something of the sort there. Yeah, tier 6
Yeah.
basically becomes permanent, whether it kills you or it transforms you.
Yeah. And there can
Um,
be types of challenges where they give you like run out of town 6, and it's like, yeah, you didn't get physically hurt, but you're not in the narrative anymore because an angry mob ran you out of town. It's that kind of thing, and that's one of the things I love about this kind of system is it's not just HP. It's not just you're physically hurt enough and now you're out. It's like there's a lot of different ways that
yeah.
these challenges can affect you.
Absolutely. And you can come out of a challenge with some kind of status like shaken that's going to, stay with you for a while, and like affect your next interactions. So this is a really important thing though to highlight for people who are new to the game. We have two types of statuses that and both can affect players' actions. One is the danger's own statuses that describe, sorry, the challenge own statuses that describe the state of the challenge. So for Sorrow Bomb, she's mysterious 2, she's fleeting 3, and she's aware 3, which it's very hard to change these things, and they affect your player's actions against this character. But at the end of the scene, they don't go with the players. These are not tags and statuses that the challenge deals to your characters. The the challenge deals to your characters what is written as consequences. So these are kind of their innate descriptors, which affect the player's actions and raise or lower the difficulty level. And these are consequences, what they can do to your player characters that will remain as a player character status. Separate types, both affect actions in different ways. So whenever you want them to hurt someone or to make them fall asleep and so on, that would be a consequences that they deal to your PCs. So this is just something that I feel like maybe new people don't instantly kind of see the difference between these things. But once you know what it is, I think it's pretty simple. Okay, I think if we don't have any more questions, we could start creating.
There is a broader gameplay question here that's interesting from Josu Recio. Could two players
Yes.
act together so as to add tags from both their characters to an action? In other words, is there sort of like a way for two people to cooperate on a single role?
Yes, there are multiple ways to take actions together. The basic one is for one character to take a setup action using maybe enhance or create to give a positive status to another character. So basically boosting another character or setting up another character and then increasing their power for their action.
Like a
But there are also
thaumaturge,
rules.
yeah, like a thaumaturge
Yeah.
touching someone and giving them like haste too.
Exactly, giving someone haste too, and then this person attacks, or helping someone, encouraging them, creating a weakness or an opening for in the enemy for your person to attack, your friend to attack. I don't any kind of thing. You can create new things for them. You can make things for them. You can heal them from statuses that are hindering them, shield them for something, and then increase their ability to mitigate consequences. And it really is endless. You can also take actions together where everyone is kind of chipping in with one tag. And this is all covered in the core book, all the types of ways that you can join forces together. Any other questions that we want to look at before diving in?
No questions. I'm not seeing the rest of the community answer in the chat. I appreciate the suggestion from Brooks Boyd that getting stabbed in the leg one could actually help in a negotiation. Hey, you
Yes, I
stabbed
was
me.
about
You
to
owe me a
say
free
that.
meal.
Absolutely. If you're wounded and you're talking to someone who's inclined um, to help someone injured, then definitely this could be a beneficial status for an action of negotiation. Not so much for an action of running after someone else.
It
So,
really it really speaks to the flexibility of the system that, these tags could be detrimental or they could be beneficial. It is a conversation between the players and the MC on like, the situation and how, the narrative flows.
absolutely, and it encourages creative solutions, and your character also could be in a mill. It's not just about injured and all those things, and restrained, and the things that you're kind of already thinking about when you start using the system and opening up to the possibilities like Kevin has for years, then you will see just how many different statuses you can come up with your character. It could be emotional things. It could be, it could be social situations. It could be magical things like cursed. It could be physical situations that you're in, like sunk in mud. It could really be anything.
Mhm.
I always say that my favorite one, which is from City of Mist, is Game Boy in Ribcage 4 was like the pinnacle of us using the statuses to be kind of interesting.
I Definitely love, since we're speaking of City of Mist, Monty Wolf from City of Mist Shadows and Showdowns, because like he's not a combative guy, he's not like a violent guy, but he's a major media personality. So like I was saying earlier, like
Yeah,
the statuses he can give you is like he destroys your reputation and runs you out of town.
yeah.
Or he blackmails you. It's like, wow, that's almost more frightening than someone trying to stab me.
Totally. And that is definitely something you can have in Legend in the Mist also. If you're
Hmm.
in the Dales, you're in Barleytown, you're starting to get into the drama of like the local genteel. Definitely I can see a character like that that is more dangerous socially than they are physically. So,
Speaking of dangerous
yeah, go ahead.
challenges, which one do we want to start out with?
Right. So we have actually four that I want to kind of blast through today. We have the winners, which I have below, and we have Old Gnarlfoot, which who didn't win, but I think is a great starter thing to do. Um,
This
so
is
it's
sort of
just a
a an MC veto that you're doing. It's like I want to make this guy.
I want to make this because I think it's a good start for people who know, Dungeons and Dragons, the other type, the basic kind of, attack fight situation. How do we do this in this game? And I think after we have that, we can then, go out to what people actually picked, which are very, very narrative situations. So I'm just going to quickly create this. Feel free to make suggestions and feel free to ask questions about how I'm doing this. So the type of this would be an attacker, but it's not really limiting. It's just something to help me identify what kind of things what kind of threats and consequences will be common for this danger. Actually, I could also see it as being a watcher, like especially if we have the troll under the bridge or an ogre under the bridge situation. The first thing that they're going to challenge you with is trying to cross the bridge without getting detected. And if you're detected, then it can transform into an attacker. We're definitely not going to be locking in this type thing.
Mhm.
Um,
I do
the
like that a
obvious
single
way,
challenge can have multiple types. Like it's not just a watcher. Like if they see
yeah,
you, then old Gnarlfoot's going to try to eat you.
yeah, that could be one thing. And like
Hmm.
one variation that we thought about, I mean, we can totally take it to a narrative place. We won't do it right now. We're just going to do a good old fight scene with an ogre, just so everyone is kind of like warmed up. In terms of limits, I'm going to say that hurt is the basic thing here. If I want to do a fight, hurt or wounded, it doesn't matter. It's the same idea. Um, and then I'm going to want to determine how long do I want this thing to survive in front of my PCs. Okay. How hard do I want to make it to defeat this character? And I'm also going to give it some defensive tags in a minute, so I know that this is not my only defense. But I want to say that an ogre like Gnarlfoot is probably going to be a 4 or a 5.
Hmm.
You know, what do you think, Kevin? Where should we put it?
I think you mentioned like we're going to give him defenses, so that's another thing to think about when thinking about these limits, because the defenses are going to make those limits, for lack of a better term, like artificially higher. So I think
Exactly.
so. Like, is the ogre like in my mind, ogres don't usually like wear armor or aren't really that well defended. Besides, like a tough hide. Like the for me, a danger with a traditional ogre is that they're big and can take a lot of damage.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I would think almost like a hurt wounded 5, and then with like a status of like a tag of tough hide even, because I don't see that status going higher than 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I really agree with that. So I think the limit could be 5 here. It also depends on what kind of ogre do you want to make, and
Mm,
who are you making it for? If you're making this ogre that's just sort of really next to the Dales, and pretty much the characters are like level 2 or 3, so to speak, when they leave the Dales, and they're not really experienced.
mm,
Or are you making it into some kind of a fearsome monster that is, a match for a thaumaturge? So you really have to think about it in that sense. But let's go with 4 and give it some defenses. 5, I would say, is maybe like some of the bigger creatures that are out in the wilderness, that are out in the wonderland. Here we're talking about someone who's in the Dolmen Knolls, just coming down. It's kind of a big burly creature. The tag of Tough Hide, I think, is really good. That's a really great tag to have for this ogre. And we're going to give it kind of a background so we can see that. What are other ways, though, that this ogre could be defeated? I think it's kind of a hungry ogre, so I would definitely have a feed
I'm sorry, I'm just
status
remembering
here.
our previous live stream where we made the character that is a chef.
Gorna and truffles. Yeah, Gorna could totally max out the feed. And I'm trying to think like, should this be easier or harder than fighting it?
Well,
And
easier, most definitely.
you think it should be easier?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it.
absolutely.
I think the narrative implication is like not how much food does it take to make this ogre like full, but just like how much food does it take giving this ogre for him to just leave you be?
Leave you. I
Yeah.
really like that because that kind of showcases how if you hurt or wound the ogre, you might get rid of them permanently or not. You might just piss them off if you're not willing to kill them. But if you feed them, you kind of resolve the problem for now, but you didn't solve the problem that we are describing here, where some homesteaders are having problems with old Norfolk. So
There
this is a
is
really great way to like figure it out for now, but not really solve the problem.
there's another limit being brought up in the chat by multiple people, an outsmarted limit or outsmart.
Definitely. And this is a great example. Outsmart is something you could do if, for example, you wanted to describe something where the characters have to outsmart old Gnarlfoot over a process. But sometimes I feel like, something like outsmart could just be a quick thing. Like,
Hmm.
did you or didn't you outsmart him in this attempt? So this is something for you to decide. Is outsmart a process or is it a quick thing? If it's a process, you're going to give it a limit. If it's another way of defeating this person, but it's really quick, it's almost like having a limit of one.
Hmm.
So you just have to overcome it and it's done. Um, so definitely outsmart. I will put a question mark here just to say, do you want to make it quick or do you want to intend for it to be a process? Of course, we can also put befriend or amuse or something, to give this character another way. Of course, the players don't see these things, so they
Hmm.
just take the actions that they want to take in the narrative and they don't know what might be the way to. Maybe this is befriend amuse 6. Like it's really hard to get it to stop eating people. So we don't know.
That sort of bumps into something that I saw earlier in the chat. Someone was asking, what happens when the players approach a challenge in a way where it doesn't have a limit? And the answer is that you can come up with these limits on the fly. In fact, I would almost encourage that because if your players are being creative and tackling a challenge from a direction that you didn't see when you were creating the challenge, or that isn't listed in like the official challenge, like definitely feel free as the MC to think about like, all right, how much would it take to approach this challenge this way? Like I could see befriend amuse like not being officially on old Gnarlfoot stat block, but as an MC thinking like, all right, it would be very hard to actually befriend this ogre. So in my head, the limit is befriend amuse 6.
Yeah, I love that. I love that part. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head. We won't show in the stat blocks every possible way of defeating a character. And maybe when you write your own stat blocks, you don't need to think about all the ways because if your players come up with a new way, you just make up either you decide it's a quick action and that's all it takes. They just have to succeed. It could still be a very difficult quick action because, for example, if you're trying to outsmart someone and they have genius or another tag, it could make things a little harder. But this is just an example. But I do agree with you. I mean, the beauty of it is you can come up with it on the spot and it could be quick or it could be a process. And if it's a process, you just choose a number from 1 to 6 for the limit.
Mhm.
Shall we talk a little bit about threats and consequences?
Certainly. Are we going to keep the genius tag on old Gnarlfoot?
Sure. What the heck? Let's just keep it
Sure,
there. No.
smart ogre.
Yeah, I think subvert the expectations. So let's just keep it there.
Cool.
What I liked about what the suggestion from Adam here is, or Adem, is that they wanted to have like an element to this ogre. It's not just an ogre; it's an ogre with some kind of an element. Um, you know, Kendo, who's working with us, created Old Gnarlfoot, and I said, Gnarl, okay, let's make this element wood. So he has arms like logs. They're made of hard to chop green wood, and one farmer swore he saw them growing. So if there is something that makes this person hard to chop, maybe instead of tough hide, I would actually give him just to flavor it a little bit more. And
Mm.
this is what we're about with Creatures of Twilight. It's something a little bit more like out of a legend than out of a video game. That's kind of expected, and we've seen this monster, and we know it's going to have a tough hide. Maybe we even kind of make it a little bit different. So Greenwood is full of water. It's just been cut. It's very dense. It's very hard to cut through. You can't set it on fire very well. So that's already one element here.
Mhm.
And let's talk a little bit about threats and consequences in that vein of something, that maybe also has something to do with the tree element in this. Sorry. So what do you think, Kevin? What's the obvious threat that this ogre can pose?
I mean, I think the obvious threat is literally old Gnarlfoot, like threatening, like, feed me a sheep or I'll eat you. Demand sheep.
Um,
Demand victuals.
demands sheep or um, or else. Okay. So or you could be more specific. This is really so that in the moment you'll have some immediate threats to use. You obviously can decide how detailed you want to be in this section. And what happens if you don't do anything after that demand? So something like this could actually create a fear status. Okay. Uh, rage, roar, and scream to be fed. And then you have a status such as terrified 3. Okay, so we usually try to match what is being threatened with, the threat with the consequence. Yes, we could have gone directly to demand sheep or he'll eat, and then just deliver the bite. But I think it's interesting to also equip these characters with the ability to strike fear in the PCs. What else? I mean, the obvious thing, just because we want to blast through it, let's just put the attack, right? The attack, the classic attack, raises a log-like arm to swat at someone. Okay, that is a classic threat move to attack, but you want to flavor it to something that's more to do with this particular character. And then the consequence of a threat like that is the classic clobber someone with their log-like or his log-like arm. What's that going to do? Again, this is the level of damage that you want to do. If it's very high, it's going to be hard for your players to mitigate it all at once. So they might be, be left with some kind of status, and that starts a downward spiral because that status affects their future actions and sometimes their future mitigation, which kind of makes everything more dramatic and more rapid. So he could be wounded 3 or broken arm 3
May I
or
make a suggestion?
concussed 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Timbered 3.
Timbered 3. Always flavor your statuses. Awesome. Yeah, okay. So this is one thing that this is kind of the basic stuff that we could do. Um, One of the things that we could also use this to do is healing actions. Okay, if he's wounded, he can take an action to heal himself. So we could have something along the lines of stare at his chopped or chopped limb as it starts to grow back. Okay, this is something that is happening in the scene. You've already given him wounded. By the way, maybe we can even change this whole wounded into chopped up. It's a little brutal, but um, chopped wood. But anyway, whatever status you've given him as a player, imagine when you start realizing that this thing regenerates. You have the MC has the establish moment. They're saying, okay, um, old Gnarlfoot starts staring at one of his chopped limbs as it starts growing back again. And of course, the consequences here would be to the limb grows back. Remove 2 chopped up status tiers. Okay, so that's another thing you can do. You can remove statuses as a consequence um, from your dangers. Okay. Any other things before we move on to the next, the actual chosen winners?
Hmm.
Any ideas that people might have? We're going to touch on specials a little later. They allow you to inject all kinds of things into the danger, kind of out of turn whenever something happens, but out of turn. And most things you can cover without using specials at all. But we're going to try and use them a little later. Any other questions we have there before we move on?
Let's see. Dirty Danchez says, "Isn't there a risk in using unfamiliar terms here? Greenwood, for example, may not imply hard skin to someone who isn't sure what greenwood is." I think that kind of just comes down to the narrative, because you have the paragraph here of Old Norfolk where it actually like describes him and describes his like his don't want to say barkskin, his, like tree trunk arms. And so, there is sort of a risk there because this is a narrative game, but it also just kind of comes down to like, all right, what is the narrative context of this? So yes, when creating your own challenges, do keep that in mind, to, like look back and be like, all right, does this status or tag or what have you communicate what I want given the narrative context?
Yeah, you definitely have to give the narrative context, especially also to your players. This is just something that we drafted today, but we did make sure to, for example, when we create a profile that is published, we make sure that you understand the context of a tag. So here you'll see they're made of hard to chop greenwood, okay?
Mhm.
Because that's maybe kind of like a little bit of a specialized word. I agree. Not sure it would pass the editor's, touch, but yeah, I mean, yes, everybody has to understand what this means. And if there is any kind of doubt, the MC makes a quick call and you move on. That's
Mhm.
that's how you do it.
I,
Okay.
I think we have a
Um,
pretty solid challenge profile here, like especially with this ogre.
yeah, I know. And I just revealed the next one, which is
Yep.
our mundane danger, Granny Scrimshaw, which won by a landslide. Um, let's read it before we start creating this challenge. Every village has its busybody, that old crone, who knows any and everybody's business. This one has everyone from the smallest child to the older man wrapped around her finger. Everyone seems to be constantly running her errands. And even though you only stopped by to sleep in the inn, you're now spending your day fixing her fence. Somehow she knows your most terrifying or embarrassing secrets. So I just love this. I love this pitch. It's so good, and I can see why it won
Yeah.
in a
I
big way.
actually I knew someone like this, like not really like the knows your terrifying or embarrassing secrets, but like I've been in a neighborhood where there was like an old person where it's like my brother would mow their lawn, and it was always like a nice thing to do, but it would always kind of come down to like him just kind of like realizing like, wait, what am I doing, what huh, and it's just sort of that like that old person magic of just like, oh hey, come on in, and then like 15 minutes later you're fixing their fence.
Totally. Yeah. And it's like this one seems to have a dark edge to it. Like
Yeah.
she knows your secrets. She can tell your secrets. And how can she tell you secrets? Is it really and it's a mundane dangers challenge. So we're going to stick with the mundane, but it sounds like there's something dark, but maybe she just has a nose for your dark secrets. Maybe she has a network of grannies with which she communicates throughout the Dales and trades rumors. Maybe she's an information broker. You don't know. And I think the more I'm talking about it, the more it sounds like
Terrifying.
that's
Terrifying.
totally. So I want to say that this type, I don't know yet, but I want to say it's either a watcher or a temptation. It's not exactly a temptation. It's more like a threat, which we need to look at, maybe changing the temptation name to something a little more influencery, but that's for another time. Um, I think we want to start with how she operates rather than how you overcome, because you could do this danger in very, very different ways. But let's start with the basic threats and consequences. Um, I think that there is a basic threat of I'm going to reveal your secret. Threatens to reveal your secrets.
I'm sorry, I saw Nathan Patrick Lane posted in the chat, Babushka Spy Network.
Totally
Once again, terrifying. Terrifying.
terrifying, terrifying. Hey, Baba Yaga, you can take it in, you can take it to
Oh,
any kind of,
start hang on,
but
wait, I'm
just
seeing a
like
trend.
Granny is also scary, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So we have threatens to reveal your secrets. And if you don't address that, if you don't stop her from doing that, what then happens? Um, a lot of things can happen. First of
Hmm.
all, you could become, in a way, there's a couple things that can happen. First of all, you could become, if the secret is blown, you could become um embarrassed or in trouble or um
I think
okay,
what's interesting,
this is the end game
yeah, what's interesting is that
move.
these consequences don't necessarily have to give tags or statuses. They can be purely narrative consequences. Like, if you're trying to keep a secret, like, hey, I have this magical sword that I don't want anyone know about. And Granny Scrimshaw's consequence could be like, great, everyone now knows you have this magic sword.
Yeah, definitely. Now, if she threatens to reveal your secrets, one of the other consequences could be that you do what she wants you to do. So
Hmm.
one of the other consequences can be compels you to do something for her, which is basically blackmail. We just
Yeah.
discussed it. So,
There,
um,
there's an interesting consequence I'm seeing here from Brian Lag, overfeeding you. So, like a threat of like offers you seconds and thirds, and if you don't address that threat, you just take this status of like overfed one. That's just like very minor status. This is a mundane challenge, but also that could get in the way of what you want to do next.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I
Over
want to take a
three.
moment
Oh
though.
man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just playing here with the numbers, but I want to take a moment here to talk a little bit about compelling statuses. It's a very interesting type of status.
Hmm.
Um, and for example, blackmail three. Okay, blackmail three basically means it's like charm, it's like convinced, it's like threatened. It basically means that she can tell you to do things, and if you try to take action that isn't what she told you to do, this status will reduce your power by three. Okay, so this is how compelling statuses work. They kind of have a directive, and if you try to do something that isn't aligned with a directive, you get a negative modifier for it. And the higher she blackmails you, the harder it is for you to do things against her wish. And if she gets to five, you're pretty much compelled in the scene to do what she wants. If she gets to six, it could be permanent. You will be permanently indentured to Granny Scrimshaw. So things can get very scary even in the Dales with no magic whatsoever.
Hmm.
Um, I think this is great. Also, something to think about: how do your players mitigate? Okay, so if I'm a
Mm.
very sneaky, smart person, I might be able to mitigate blackmail three. If I'm a person that can resist being, for example, has no guilt. Okay, maybe I have the tag has no guilt. Maybe I'm playing the apple picker and I have tags like rascal. Okay, so maybe I can bounce back from that. Okay, you give me blackmail three, but I'm going to burn rascal, get a power of three, and mitigate the heck out of this thing. So I just ignore you. So when you do something like this, you have to remember that there is still a possibility that the players, and a good thing, it's a good thing, right? It doesn't,
Hmm.
a consequence isn't final. There's still the role of being able to mitigate it. I think we also need something actually before threatens to reveal your secret, snoops around and asks questions about you, or something maybe a little less obvious, right? This is the threat that comes before um, signals that she knows your darkest or most embarrassing secret. So this is a consequence, again, a narrative consequences that would happen um, after some kind of thread that she takes interest in you. It could be a little more obvious, like she's snooping around, she's asking a question about you. You hear from someone that she has asked about you, and it's like, oh no, I better stop this, or she's gonna find out that I have that, magic sword that I'm hiding. Or it could be something much more subtle, like you don't know who it is. Things like people stare at you from a distance.
Hmm.
And this is more of a threat that you're going to allow the players to maybe roll some investigative rolls and try to find out why are people staring at me from a distance and whisper in each other's ears.
It's also a distinct possibility that it's like you narrate, these people are staring at you from a distance, and the players are like, all right, I don't care about them. I'm going to continue doing my thing. And then it's like, oh,
Yeah, and then you can always delay consequences. You can say, I'm going to roll out these consequences later, and at some point it is revealed, or she signals that she knows your darkest and most embarrassing secret, and then you have the possibility to reveal it and embarrass you, to compel you to do something, to sit you, and specifically to sit you down and overfeed you, which is an adorable touch. I really like it.
hmm.
What kind of tags and statuses are we gonna give the granny? And then we'll come back to the limits. So I want to say
Well,
something like, what do you think?
yeah, like definitely something along the lines of the Granny Spy Network, or like Gossip Circle, or something along those lines of like this is
Yeah,
something that she uses. I don't Then again, I don't know how that
I
would
like
come up.
Gossip Circle.
Yeah, Gossip Circle. I don't know
Yeah, I
how that
like
would
that.
come up in a specific role. I guess players could mitigate that, not mitigate, but like attempt to like reduce that effectiveness of like, all right, I am trying to spread my own stuff within the town, or I am trying to like clear my name, or I am trying to like investigate this. And then the gossip circle comes into play. But then, that same character, another character could be like, all right, I'm going to do my best to try to like break up this gossip circle. I'm going to, throw in like my own drama, my own poison. Um,
Yeah. You're talking about removing it, which is a great action for people to try to do, a great social action for people to try to do, or burning it for her or whatever, like not allowing her to use it. But before that, I think you immediately went for the obvious questions that when we build challenges, we go for the question, what role of the players is this going to be in? And for me,
hmm
Gossip Circle is going to be when the players are trying to hide something. Like
hmm
I'm trying to walk around undetected at night. Oh, wow, you have Gossip Circle. Good luck for you. You have a -1 or whatever. And, we could also have alert for when she's present. Maybe she's super alert and it's really hard to do things when she's around. Um, that could be another thing that's relevant. She could also have like a guilt trip expert, something that will allow her to make social attacks more effectively and make your players' um, lives harder when they try to mitigate her social attacks. I think
They're
these
just the
things
worst.
are, what's that?
Just the worst. A
Just
guilt
the
trip
worst.
expert.
I
What?
think this is really
Me?
cool.
Oh, why are you accusing me of being up to something? Anyways, that new sword.
Yeah, this is exactly it. You nailed it. How do you vanquish such a thing? How do you overcome this danger? That's what we're going to need to answer in order to figure out the limits.
Well, this is a very like social challenge. Like it's I mean, I suppose by default you could put a hurt and subdue limit on there, but even then, like, that would
Yeah,
be
I
hurt
mean,
subdue like
you're
one
really
or
gonna hurt a
two.
granny.
Yeah. The
You're
the
really gonna
main
hurt a granny. It's
the
like,
main limit would be something like discrediting her or putting her in social disgrace. Yeah,
ooh,
if because she's a gossip. She benefits from this role in town of like being the person people talk to. But if you disgrace, like if you disgrace her socially, like that breaks up like her gossip circle and suddenly people are talking about her.
wow, this is really interesting. But you have to find out her secrets to do it. You can't just make her disgraced. It's an action that has to be founded on something. I really like that.
hmm
I don't think it's particularly hard. I think to achieve once you know, it could also be a completely narrative way of defeating her.
hmm
Um, but if you do take it to that angle of tracking the process of disgracing her as something that builds up until it reaches a point where she says, "Okay, I'm not going to mess with you anymore." It's interesting, and I also changed
hmm
the status that she deals into disgrace so that it's kind of a fight of who's going to max out each other's disgrace first.
Mhm. I think
Um,
having it be a limit is interesting because, like, you could have the narrative thing where it's like you find some blackmail of hers, and then you just kind of disgrace her from that without even touching the limit. But there's
yeah,
also an angle here of like I'm just going to spread lies about Granny Scrimshaw, and so then
yeah,
that can easily become like, all right, you need to roll to see how effective these lies are. Like that's when you start building up those statuses.
that's awesome. I think also threaten is an interesting question. Could you bully her out of dealing with you? Probably not so easily, but maybe 3, maybe 4. Maybe it's not really something that you want to recommend bullying a granny in this stream. Um, so maybe one more.
I I appreciate that with Threat and 4, like Granny Scrimshaw has seen some things. Like
Yeah,
like
it's
Granny
not so
Scrimshaw is
easy.
actually kind of hard to intimidate.
You could put a little touch and do something along the lines of scared of the twilight. Like if you're
Oh,
bringing in something of the twilight, it's going to be easier to scare her. for example.
Hmm.
I'm just like, just little things. I would say also maybe isolate, like make it so that she can't actually access information.
Mm. I feel
That's
like that
another way.
I feel like there's a lot of overlap between like isolate and disgrace there.
And disgrace, yeah, there might be a little too overlapping. Anyway, I think this is really good. Maybe we should
Hmm.
move on to the next one. Any points from the audience?
Let's see. There are some people suggesting a limit for like complimenting her, like getting on her good side. Like is
Of
there an amount
course. I
that
like
you
that
can
better.
get within her good graces so that way she leaves you
Mm.
alone?
Yeah, it's like counter grannyism.
Hmm.
Compliment or it's like befriend, but it has a different flavor to it. It's more like get on her good side. Um,
Yeah, so it's like either you compliment her or, you give her like juicy gossip, you become part of the network. Like, there's a sort like, you have your limits for like, hey, Granny, leave me alone or I'll burn down your house. And then there's limits for, hey, Granny, how's it going? Listen, thanks for keeping that secret. Do I got some juicy gossip for you?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically a million and one ways of getting on her good side. So you might want to go to like a specific action, like compliment, but then maybe you want to, before making it into a limit, kind of think about it. Is it an action or is it the way to get rid of her or to overcome the problem? So in this case, getting on her good side permanently, or like at least for the time being, is going to be a way of overcoming the problem.
Some other suggestions for the name
Cool.
of this limit is suck up, endear, flatter, and butter up.
All of these are actions that end with kind of, you know, basically making an ally out of her,
Yeah.
or getting on her good side, or uh, teaming up with her, and so on. But these are actions, right? You flatter or you sell her some information and all these. I think this is great. Let's
Yeah.
move to the next one. And the winner of the Twilight danger is not Highland Falls. It's actually that's the winner of the land dangers. It's actually the Twilight Biscuit Party. So let's read about that
Oh.
and see how we're gonna do that. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, it's a
It
very
was
Alice in
this one
Wonderland
was
one.
closer. The Oathbound Spectre was also high up there. So yeah, let's take a look at this one. Suggested by Pippa. One of the many elders' tales in the Dales is of a tea time party one can only encounter when traveling on their own near the Aldenwood. A giant toad, hare, and raven will block your path, sitting around a table cluttered with tea and light snacks, eating and chatting with the most refined manners you've ever seen. As the story goes, attempting to rudely ask them to leave will only cause them to ignore you, and those who go around strangely come upon them again and again. Instead, one must politely intrude and join them and offer an exciting tale of one's travels. If they are impressed, then a handsome reward could be won.
So something to bring up here because this challenge and the previous challenge dealt less with like physical statuses and more with like emotional and social statuses. Like the thing with the Twilight Biscuit Party is like this is a magical social situation that you have to like navigate around. And Granny Scrimshaw is more of a situation of like, rumors, social stuff, all that. Jorge Pongitor in the chat brings up a concern I've seen raised in Discord was giving a PC a mental status like sad or embarrassed, and how that impacts player agency. Could we touch on that? The thing with those statuses is you want to step away from stuff where it's like you fail now you have to do this. At least in my perspective on game design, but these statuses work to. Um, influence like the narrative in a way. Like, if you get, for example, frightened too while you're fighting a dragon, that doesn't mean that your character now has to like turn around and run or, soil themselves or anything like that. But any action they take where being frightened would be a detriment to them, then the status is going to affect their rolls. So it's like your character gets frightened too. All right, well, I'm still going to charge up and fight that dragon. Okay, you're going to take a -2 to your rolls though, because you're overcoming, or at least attempting to overcome, that fear. And the same thing with like embarrassed or blackmailed. It's, it's like someone's trying to blackmail you, it's not necessarily like now you have to do this. It's more like if you do something against that status is still going to affect you.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think that it kind of strikes a really nice balance between this is a game where your character can become sad or can be made sad by forces in the story, and player agency, because players get to mitigate. And when they get to mitigate, that's where the agency shines. They can burn tags. They can, they have other actions that they can do to push the mitigation. They could take consequences, sorry, not in mitigation, but there are other things, we won't get into all of the rules. There are other things they can do in order to sacrifice something to not become sad in that moment. And if it
Hmm.
really matters to them, it says they activate those power options, and they take agency of the situation and say, sorry, this doesn't affect me because boom, 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 I'm going to burn these tags, or because I have a ton of tags of happy-go-lucky and whatever doesn't, can resist sadness, or
Hmm.
even just someone that knows who they are and isn't easily affected by other things. So this is really where the system, I think, shines, because it's totally okay to say this thing or this creature is trying to make you sad. And then, it's up to the player to say, what am I going to sacrifice to make it true that I'm not, I don't become sad, or I don't become as sad. And then the
Yeah.
dice, the dice get in there as well. And some of the time, because some types of power options actually override the dice, but the dice get in there and they kind of say, yeah, this time you did get a little sad. This thing got to you. And it's a compelling status. It means, like Kevin said, it doesn't mean you can't take action that are happy, but something is definitely pushing you back.
And these statuses act as mostly a hindrance from tier 1 through 4. It's when you hit tier 5 or 6 when they become debilitating. In the same way that, like, hit with a hammer 5 knocks your character unconscious, blackmailed 5 or embarrassed 5, or let's be really simple, frightened 5 is going to be like, all right, the equivalent of your character being knocked unconscious in this situation. Frightened 5 would have your character be either like paralyzed in fear, or in a conversation between the player and the MC, maybe that does mean they turn around and run. There's a lot more narrative consequence to tier 5 and 6 statuses, because they are equivalent to, on the physical level, being knocked out of the fight.
Being overcome,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. Um, yeah, we can talk. I love compelling statuses. I definitely agree, though, that if you're creating a monster that makes your player sad, your PC sad to the point of incapacitating them, it's definitely something you need to talk about before you roll out these monsters. We've had these things in City of Mist. We also have some of them, I think, in Otherscape, and we'll have some really interesting monsters that do emotional things here. Maybe we can talk about Twilight, Creatures of Twilight, a little bit more later. But yeah, so it's something you need to check with your table first.
I'm sorry, I find it so funny, the concept of like a creature that's like so sad themselves that it's hard to like act against them because they are so sad.
Yeah.
Like a magical three-legged puppy appears and talks to you, and
Oh
it's
my
just like,
God.
"Hey, would you help me out?" And it's like, if you don't, like, you take sadness statuses because you have to look that three-legged puppy in the eye and say no. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah,
the
that's
tangent.
pretty gruesome. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
It's just,
I
it's
agree.
so
Yeah, and you
sad.
can do that. It's so sad. You can totally do that in this system if you wanted to. You
Hmm.
can also make a danger that makes people happy to the point of losing control. And we
Mm.
also have a challenge, and we also did that. Let's see what this challenge does. Unless we have some good points to cover, Kevin.
Yeah,
There.
speaking of magical animals that are hard to say no to, I'm very interested in this challenge. It like I said, it's very Alice in Wonderland of just kind of like stumbling on a tea party of like magic animals and just being like, well, okay, this is some I gotta deal with now.
Yeah. So to me, this challenge actually acts like a wall, like a barrier or an obstacle, something that you have to get past. We've already kind of named the obvious ways to overcome it. You can impress them, which I think will be, I don't know, maybe, let's make them something a little more reasonable, maybe three.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
not everything has to be a like, huge hurdle like near boss fight. Some of these challenges can just
yeah.
be incredibly simple.
Yeah, I mean, things that are at 4 and 5 and have defenses, you're going to spend a whole scene fighting them. You're basically saying this is going to take a lot of effort, and my players are going to have to burn a lot of tags and make sacrifices and use resources to overcome them. Sometimes it's nice to have something that resolves, not in a long and involved scene.
Hmm.
I think because they are creatures of twilight, banished is definitely something that we want to have here. It might be easier to banish them um, than to impress them, or it might not be. Maybe it's quite hard. One thing we didn't talk about when we created the ogre is the size factor, or what we call the scale. That's another element that some challenges will have, is that they're a group, so it's harder to affect all of them. We won't dive into that right now, but just be aware that that exists in the full rules. We take into consideration whether it's a big group or a big creature like Gnarlfoot. Um, we'll skip that for now. So these are the two things that kind of pop immediately to mind. Um, Rights and consequences. What kind of things do this rowdy party does?
Let's see. Do we need to put into the challenge profile the bit that's in the narrative paragraph of like, if you leave, then they show up again? Like, does that need to be codified in the challenge profile? Or is that more of like, as an MC, you keep that in your head as per the narrative?
I personally like to keep it in my head. You could totally put it in a special and just create a rule. For example, oh no, you don't. Just give it a name and then say something along the lines.
Ah, there we go.
When you pass by the no, sorry, the Twilight Biscuit Party, um, without engaging with them.
Now we didn't touch
Um,
the special feature section in the previous challenges, so yeah, I'm glad it's coming up now. This is a perfect place to put that kind of effect in these special features, or abilities that sort of like break or twist the rules a little bit. Like in the special features of like a challenge profile, you can put stuff like this status is only here for a little bit, or this status lasts like 2 days or something like this where it's like when where it doesn't really fit into the threat consequence give statuses burn tags like mechanical system. It's more of a narrative like if you try to pass by these people you'll show up at their party again. And I think that it's great to have that section in these challenge profiles, especially for as narrative of a game as this.
yeah, exactly. Like these are trigger and outcome rules that you create a kind of a custom rule for this day for this challenge, and it's exactly what you said. You do this to cover things that aren't covered by other elements. So there are some things that you're just going to describe in the narrative, and there are rules that you want to create. Maybe this is quite a narrative rule, but it could also be something like um, it could be when you attack the Twilight Biscuit Party, you first take what happens to you when you try to strike the hare, toad, and crow? Um,
Oh,
Wild Hiccups
ooh, okay, I like that.
3. Okay, so
Now,
you know,
when you have a special feature like that, when it's like when you attack this person, you first take the status. Uh, are players able to mitigate that status?
yes, there is no reason for players not to be able to mitigate it. Mitigation in general is
Hmm.
something that happens based on the MC's decision.
Hmm.
But if the MC rules that they can try to avoid it, they can. This is quite a magical thing. So in
Yeah,
this
so
situation,
it'd be a little weird to be able to mitigate like suddenly getting magical hiccups. You're right.
right, unless you are some kind of a practitioner.
Yeah, if you're a
Um,
thaumaturge or you have a character who's like, I'm going to invest tags in having a strong stomach.
Right. Or even if you're playing the wise one from the Tinderbox demo, maybe you have wards against all kinds of woodland creatures of Twilight that are just a major hassle and a major pain in your butt because you don't have time for this thing. So maybe you
Hmm.
have a little ward or a talisman that you've prepared against it, and that kind of prevents you from getting wild hiccups. But these all of these what I call active shield specials, like things that happen before or when you try to attack. They're very well represented by hiccups.
Hmm.
Sorry, by specials. But yeah, this is a great example for that.
Hmm.
We got a couple of those in. Um, so the interesting thing about barriers and obstacles is that oftentimes they don't pose threats actively. They don't actually actively do anything to you. They just get in your way.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to think about what kind of things. So in these situations, the tags and statuses are going to be what defines the difficulty of the challenge. Like, is it hard to impress them? Is this challenge really about understanding what the heck this toad, raven, and hare want from you? And then maybe I would just give them something like confusing or bewildering, a kind of a tag that what the heck is going on, and when you this tag would be used to reduce your power when you're trying to take an action to understand what the heck is going on,
Another thing
and
to think
how
about.
the heck to resolve this problem.
Yeah, and on that same vein, like when creating challenges, it is good to think about it from the perspective of a player. Like when a player comes up to the Twilight Biscuit party and sees that they can't just walk around it, all right, what's the next thing that they're going to do to try to get through this challenge? And then think about what would be the consequences if those actions failed. And so, yeah, as a player, I would be thinking like, all right, I'm either going to think about this from a investigation stance, like, am I gonna, can I look around for like a path out of here, or can I see like specific things on these animals to see what they like? Can I get some traits from them? From a social stance of like, all right, how much do I need to entertain these
Hmm.
magical animals, or how much do I need to socialize in order to get past this? um Also the like, all right, is there a way to like hurt them? And then that comes up with like the special features of like the wild hiccups and all that, so we've already kind of covered that avenue. And then the sort of like, all right, is there a way to banish these? And then if you fail to banish them, what would be a good consequence of that? So maybe,
Yeah.
like hurting and banish, the consequences already, like you get wild hiccups from like the special features. But from
Hmm.
the socializing standpoint, what would be a consequence from a failed socializing role with the Twilight Biscuit Party? Is it
Yeah,
like
that's a
you
great
get, yeah,
point.
is it like you get a status? Is it like a narrative consequence of you lose a certain amount of time? Uh, what are your thoughts on that, Amit?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is that they feel a little bit snooty to me. So maybe they look down on you, or I don't know how to phrase that, but kind of, crunch their nose at you, or like they're not really impressed by you, or pretend not to be impressed. And then you can either remove one tier from entertain,
Mm,
or you could also give kind of like, or give someone ignored. Okay. So this is an ignored could weaken your, your future statuses, your future actions. It's a status that could do that to you. It could reduce your ability to take social actions, or it could kind of pull back their level of entertainment. Um, they're kind of, and the threat that could come around that is like maybe lose interest or begin to show disdain. Maybe something like that. They're kind of, mm, they start making all kind of snooty faces, because that's the vibe I'm getting from that creature. Another thing that could happen is, like you said, there could be time passes, um, opportunities are lost, etc. Like some kind of a narrative thing. Another thing that could be happening is um, it's almost in the same category as pretend not to be impressed. You could burn one of the PC's tags. Like if the PC is very good at, you know telling stories, or very musical, you could just actually say, these people look down on you. These well, not people, but this toad, hare, and raven, that are so kind of like refined and very precious. They look down on you so badly that this side of you just becomes completely irrelevant for the scene, and could be you know, kind of a burn in more ways than one.
mhm. Honestly, I think we have a pretty good challenge profile with this. We've
Yeah.
got limits, we got a starting tag or status rather. We have like threats and consequences that can be used for the variety of angles that players can use to tackle this challenge. This is interesting. I would actually put this into one of my games. I would also say for all the other challenges that we've made during this stream.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really fun one that Peppa came up with. We're going to be in the setting book for Hearts of Ravensdale, going to delve really deeply into what kind of creatures of Twilight are there. And just to give people a taste of that, um, a couple of the types that you could look at is, we mentioned the children of Twilight, um, that are more like spirits or angels or something like that. We're going to go much deeper into exactly what they are, where they come from, um, how they influence this world, what do they want. As we said in the sidebar of the Tinderbox demo adventure, we talk a little bit about what Sorrow Bomb is and how she's kind of really made for a specific purpose. So the children they're very specific creatures with very specific reason to be where they are, very conscious, from almost like from another level of awareness and consciousness. Um, Things like these, all of the little monsters of the world and the creatures of the world are, in a way, without getting too much into the cosmology, they're kind of like fallen children. They maybe used to have a deeper connection to the cosmos and greater powers and a deeper spirit that is just manifested in the case of Sorrow Bomb, like a person. So what seems to be a person, but they kind of dropped from that higher world in a way, or deeper world, into our own existence. So, and by doing that, they're kind of half and half in both worlds. You can banish them, but they're not going to disappear into thin air. In most cases, they're just going to run away. because they're kind of locked in this physical world. And this has a um, really interesting connection to the greater cosmology of this universe, and almost like the entire quest that is built into the Hearts of Ravensdale of what really happened that brought down, in a way, some of the children into that midway in between state, between where maybe human beings are and where the children are. And these monstrosities and creatures and oddities belong to that class of creatures of Twilight, which can be terrifying. Some of them have maybe retained their intelligence, but not so much their might. Others have retained their might, but maybe not so much their higher intelligence, maybe like Gnarlfoot. So there's a great variety and then there are different types of creatures of Twilight, which we didn't even touch, on things created by thaumaturgy or as side effects from the use of thaumaturgy, and so on and so forth. So this was just like we talked about it before the stream of maybe touching a little bit on the different classes of creatures that we're going to encounter. It's definitely going to be a major thing we're going to do in the setting.
So real quick, just wanted to rapid fire some questions that I've seen in the chat.
Yeah.
Apollo Kitten Apollo asks, is there a mechanism for players to discover what possible traits, tags, limits a challenge has, or is it down to trial and error? Yeah, there's multiple ways that you can go about this. Maybe you've heard about this challenge, and so you spend some time, like investigating it before you encounter it, or during the encounter itself, you roll to see, like, all right, I want to check out what this creature has going on, and a lot of that is handled through the discover effect. It could also be just like a quick roll as well, like, hey, real quick, I just want to see, is there a nick in this guy's armor? Or like, hey, this is a spooky ghost, can I roll to see how much I know about the spooky ghost? Like that kind of thing. um, Brian Legg asks, how would you handle someone just brute forcing their way through some of these more social challenges? Well, I would say you would handle that mostly through the narrative. Like going back to Granny Scrimshaw. Yeah, you could probably beat up Granny Scrimshaw pretty easily. That probably won't help you out in the long run because now everyone's mad at you for beating up Granny Scrimshaw. But there's also like the magical ways, like the Twilight Biscuit Parties feature of like, if you try to attack them, then magically you get wild hiccup. So there's a lot of different ways you can handle people brute forcing their way. And then another
Just
question that was
before
brought up.
diving into that, I do want to say on the last point, I really agree with you. I think it's also really important that this point was brought up because you want to create something that will happen if they try to brute force it, like the
Mhm.
hiccups. And
Yeah.
usually that something is going to pull them back into the world of this challenge. It's almost going to force them, not in a way that takes their agency, but in a game way. Like, okay, here's a status. Maybe you can get rid of it, but if not, you're just going to have to talk your way through this, or hiccup your way through this. But yeah, you want to
Mhm.
create little mechanisms that pull them back into the um, type of experience that you want them to have. With, of course, different exits, so it's interesting for everyone. You're
Mhm.
not like railroading them.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about this game engine. It's like there's like by design, there's a lot of different ways to challenge, well, to tackle challenges that aren't just fight them until their HP reaches 0. One other question that was brought up by both Denglish Design and VastGR is rewards for tackling challenge profiles. Would that be a thing that is often placed in a danger profile, or would that be more of a thing of like, this could be placed in the challenge profile, would this be a thing that would be placed in the challenge profiles, like flavor text, or like when you're writing an adventure, this would be information that would be outside of the challenge profile, like after you complete the Twilight Biscuit Party, they give you tag, the magical biscuits for the road.
Yeah. So we actually haven't locked in yet how we're doing it for Legend in the Mist. I can tell you that in Otherscape there is a type of content called catalogs and loot catalogs, which are a little external, but they come together near the challenge profile. and then you kind of know what you picked up from the challenge. All of these things, are good solutions. Sometimes we have put it in City of Mist. We have put it in the description. Sometimes we put it in the description of the scene. If you overcome the challenge, then you might be able to get this or that. We usually don't put it in the challenge profile because it's something that can be used in different places, and not in all places you will have the same kind of loot or reward.
Hmm.
You want to match it to the narrative space. So that's kind of like the one with the least likelihood of being implemented. But we still don't have a final decision on how that's going to be implemented. It probably will work similar to Otherscape, where you can add certain things to your backpack and then decide when you're packing up next time that you want to highlight those things.
Do we want to move on to the last challenge, the traversal challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So we also we unlocked the Bestiary and Survival add-on to the core book. So we're definitely going to have more lands and more traversable dangers than we originally planned to, which is awesome. We can really explore that and make it, make the journey part of this a real part of the game if you wish to do that. So again, a journey can be a narrative thing, a journey, just like any action in the game. It could be a narrative thing only. It could be a quick check to see how did you guys do and how much did it tire you out, or what kind of resources it cost you. Moving on. Or you can make a journey into a challenge profile, which is um, challenge. So in this case, we have Highland Falls, and the story goes, as you set out to cross the rugged crag and highlands, narrow ledges and old bridges form a path between the mountain peaks and cascading falls, with only frail, windswept trees below to catch your fall if you slip. Giant birds of prey watch from the skies, eager to dive down and grab anything that looks like easy prey. Yet despite all the danger, the natural beauty is unmatched, and the locals consider it a rite of passage to traverse the cliffs and live to tell the tale. So this is definitely a barrier obstacle type of all lands in a way are barrier obstacles. It's something to pass through, or to get to the other side of. And the basic way that these things function is that they have um, a traverse limit, and the tier of that limit really determines how many rounds, so to speak, how many travel actions do you want this journey to take. Now, the beauty of a land challenge is that you could have 10 scenes while you're still resolving this journey. And the way you do it is that you have them roll for the action to travel only before or after downtime, or when they're not actively in a scene, or when they're in a scene that takes a very long time, like a travel scene. You can't do it if you have a 5-minute conversation with Ol Gnarlfoot, by the bridge. It's not the narrative time frame to make a travel action. So you want to think about how hard is it going to be, how long is it going to take to traverse this highland. So let's just say 4. If someone is really good at it, maybe they can tackle it in 1 action if they're super lucky, or 2 actions. This brings it back to the question about group roles and acting together, which is, it exists in the rules. So maybe that's something the group does together, or maybe there's one leader and people are just helping the leader. All these options are happening, but basically, in order to move forward, the players have to take a travel action, which uses the advance effect to give a traverse status to his danger. And when they max out the limit, they arrive on the other end.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple. And then you have all the stuff that threatens them while they're on their way. So, for example, the giant birds of prey could be, there's a lot of like environmental stuff we'll get into, but I just want to say the giant birds of prey could be two different things. It could be a separate challenge profile, or it could be some kind of action that this land takes against you. So, for
Hmm.
example, giant birds of prey circle overhead. Okay, that's a sorry. That's a threat. You're just kind of narrating this to your players. You go through the rugged terrain and walk by the cliffs.
Hmm.
As above, you hear the calls of giant birds of prey circling overhead. And
Going on your typo earlier, praying birds would also be
prey
something I would
birds.
expect to see in Legends in the Mist. Like if I saw like
Absolutely.
two falcons with their like claws and like prayer, I'd be like, I don't want to mess with
Giant
this.
birds of prey. Yeah. And the consequences, oops, first of all, I'm putting in tags and statuses. That's all wrong. The consequences that you could have to something like that is it depends on what you want these birds to do. So if they are eager to dive down and grab anything that looks like easy prey, maybe dive down and steal some supplies. Burn supply tags. That's a great thing that a land can do to you. Um, dive down and pick a wounded person. That's kind of cruel, but maybe um,
That's nature.
increase, yeah, increase wounded tier. Or, well, basically, you can just say you give them wounded one, and that slowly builds up their damage from whatever wounded they were to a worse situation.
Yeah, I was about to say that would be an interesting wording though, because then that consequence would only happen if someone already had wounded statuses. So it's
Yeah,
another thing. It's another thing to think about when writing these challenges is the wording you put on them and the parameters that you put on some of these abilities. Like this is a narrative heavy game, so those matter.
yeah, absolutely. So this is like environmental stuff that we can add here. And like you said, we could condition it like some of the stuff only applies to wounded or maybe hungry person. Um, but let's talk about the traverse action. So your players are
Hmm.
rolling for traverse action. What kind of tags and statuses are we going to put here that will make it harder for them? Um,
Let's
so
see,
we have,
windy.
yeah, windy. Absolutely. This is when we're going to really lay into those tags because tags represent permanent qualities of this challenge, rather than something temporary. Windy could also be a temporary situation, so it might be a status. Um, but it's windy. It's
Narrow ledges.
yeah, narrow ledges, high falls.
Mm.
If you're falling from somewhere high, it's going to be harder to mitigate the whatever damage. This is
Now,
definitely the kind of the one of the basic threats that we're going to have here, like the kind of when you look down below and you see the height that you're in, and kind of it's jarring. The height is jars. Okay, something like that, a threat,
to
and
give
then
you a status of
falling.
like Vertigo 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
Or
And you can
yeah.
also get vertigo. Absolutely. I think both are really good.
Hmm.
Become dizzy with vertigo. So dizzy 2. maybe something like this. But we also want to list what's going to happen when you fall and break your neck. Um, Dead 6, you know? Or if you want to be a little not as dangerous, maybe you're going to have something like severely injured, 5 or 4.
I'm sorry, I'm imagining the scene at the table where I'm sitting in the MC chair and it's just like, yes, so you take dead 6.
Yeah,
Just the legend in the mist equivalent of rocks fall, everyone dies.
that's basically what happens if you drop off a cliff and you're
Yeah.
not, you can try to mitigate it.
You can still mitigate it,
Um,
yeah.
so here, you know how you have like those frail, windswept trees? I mean, they're maybe, kind of hanging on to the side of the ledge. Maybe that's a tag that you can use. I don't really know how that's going to help you if you're not really um, light. Like if you're, maybe it only helps light people to mitigate it, but by grabbing onto it, and if you're truffles, then unfortunately maybe you might not survive the fall. But it really depends on what you want to do here. Maybe it's severely injured, maybe it's dead, maybe actually what happens by definition is that you're hanging on by, well, not by a thread, by hanging on to a branch. 4. So when it happens to you, there's very little you can do other than try to climb back up by reducing the status. So it's more of a restraint status. You slip off and you're grabbing onto the branch or to the ledge or something like that. And now you can't actually do anything else almost other than
Hmm.
try to save yourself.
Another thing to think about
Yeah.
with threats with a traversal challenge is like it's very easy to think of these threats as hurdles people come across during their traveling. So I could easily see
Yes.
one of the threats for Highland Falls being an old rickety bridge shows up. Like, and that's literally the threat. It's like the only way forward is over this old rickety bridge. How do you deal with it?
You come across an old rickety bridge, and then you basically need to take a quick action. Most of the time, it's going to be a quick action, unless you really want to walk them past the bridge step by step. And the bridge has its own limit. But if you don't, then somebody is going to have to take an action. You can even make it into a negative tag, or rickety could be a tag. It's not stable, it's not going to be so easy to cross it. And there you go, you already have a challenge built into the threat. Something they need to pass, get through, and then maybe they become dizzy and vertigo, or they fall and break their neck and so on. So this is kind of another variation or something height related that's dangerous that could happen.
Hmm.
um you could
Yeah.
also have something like, you pick up a little bit of things from the story and just build them into it. So, for example, unmatched beauty, I think is an interesting tag if someone wants to try to make an inspiration role, something that will give them courage or a reason to go on, or maybe something completely unrelated to um, to to the traversal challenge. Maybe it's just about um, in that moment they make a roll to give themselves a kind of a boosting status, or maybe to go deeper inside and find new powers in themselves. And if they do that, you're like, okay, there's unmatched beauty here, so you can add one to your roll. That inspires you. That beauty inspires you.
Very much Samwise carrying Frodo to the top of a mountain and being like, "Look, there's still good things in the world."
There you go.
Like just look the beautiful vistas themselves could help with like a role to help inspire yourself or your comrades during this dangerous traversal.
Yeah. So anything in the story can be, gameplay affecting, can have meaning in the game. I do also want to say that you could even have different traversal limits. Like you could have something like um, swim two, climb four, and so on.
Ride like
Um,
3, like maybe it's easier or harder to do this with like a wagon.
yeah, ride specifically, I wouldn't separate from walk because if you have a horse as a tag, it's just going to make your traversal roll easier,
Hmm.
or you have a wagon. But yeah, depending on, it could definitely be something like rugged terrain, and then it's quite hard for horses to pass there, and for wagons.
It's becoming a very
Um,
detailed challenge. But
yeah, I mean, and it's fine.
I think that's kind of the nature of the traversal challenges, though, is that there can be quite a lot of environmental factors that come into play depending on how you decide to traverse it.
Yeah, and you don't have to roll them out as an MC. You don't have to roll out each and every one of those items. And you only roll them out when the players take action affected by these. So they're counting up their tags and their power, and you're going to say, well, this ledge is also quite narrow, or they're trying to mitigate falling, and they say, this is a high fall, so mitigation is going to be harder for you. So you only kind of roll out these things when they become relevant.
I think I got a
Um,
pretty good challenge on this. Is there anything else we need to add? Because we have limits, we have the tags and statuses, we have a variety of threats and consequences for the different hurdles that could come up while traversing and the different ways people could traverse it. Um, yeah, honestly, I think this is pretty good.
think it's pretty good.
Oh,
Maybe we
actually,
can try.
real
Go
quick,
ahead.
because this could come up. Denglish Design asks if I want to have a separate, let's say, combat challenge in this Highland Falls area, would it be a separate thing? Or would all of these tags, like, if you have a combat encounter within the Highland Falls, could these tags and statuses become a factor in that combat?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a challenge inside a challenge. This is a greater challenge of traversal. You're still in this land, so everything that happens here is affected by it.
Hmm.
But the classic way of creating a like random encounter, not so random encounter, in this way of describing lands is to create a threat, saying like you hear the ruckus of a war party
Hmm.
in the distance.
And
Okay,
then,
for
the
example, and
consequence could
then,
be this challenge appears.
right, exactly. So the consequence is completely narrative, but it's reflected by a different challenge profile. So a Kragan Highlander war party descends upon you.
So,
And this could also be a situation that unfolds narratively or that unfolds without the threat ahead of time. Maybe you make a camping roll or some downtime, or maybe you take some kind of action to camp or to recover or to stop, and then you get a consequence and you just strike them with an ambush
now,
with this.
So Jorge Ponchator brings up a good point. I'm going to sort of paraphrase their
Yes,
question here, but for these traversal challenges, a lot of times they will be challenged as a group. It's like you and your party members are traversing through the highlands here. Um,
yeah.
so what is the mechanics of something like a group check? Like how many people would have to like roll if it's like so for example the height of these, or like you come across an old rickety bridge threat, would just one person have to make the roll, or would everyone have to make the roll? And if
Yeah.
so, how do these sort of like group check mechanics work currently in Legend in the Mist?
Yeah, so you have several options. One of the options is this is interesting enough to see how each person deals with this, because maybe if one person slips, then the scene becomes more interesting. And then you actually have individual players check and using their strengths and weaknesses. In other, probably just doing a quick, quick check to cross, but individual quick checks, they can help each other. Someone can stop to make a rope and tie everyone and give everyone a status of secured two that will help them, in case they fall, to mitigate a fall, and so on and so forth. This is like really zooming into a challenge. You can also just say, okay, it's a bridge, let's see what happens, and without getting into too much specific detail. Um, but let's see if something interesting happens. And then
Mhm.
you can have a group role where there are two forms of it. One of them, without getting too much into detail, one of them is where one person leads the role and other people help him with just getting one tag each. And another way is that when the whole group is rolling together. And um, they have different reasons to use them. So, for example, if someone is leading the group through a forest, then they might be a leader. But if the group is just crossing altogether, it could be a group role. And then if you get consequences, you can say this character drops, or you could apply it to everyone, or you could apply it to one person, or you could apply it to something completely different that happens. And it just resolves faster.
Mhm.
So it's less of a focus on each and every step and who drops and who stumbles and who gets scared and who drops something into the ravine, like one of their tags or one of their backpack tags. Um, and then the other option is like you cross the bridge, but Simon almost falls. He comes away feeling a little shaken. Moving on.
Um, we've sort of reached where our had a brain fart there. Uh, so we've gone. Those are all the challenges that we're kind of hitting. We had sort of the ogre as a more combative challenge. We had Granny Scrimshaw for the mundane challenge. We had the Highlands for the traversal challenge, and we had the Twilight Biscuit Party for the creatures, the Children of Twilight challenge. So
Yeah.
just in this stream, we've shown just how flexible this system can be, especially with challenge profiles showing a lot of different kinds of threats and challenges. And even within each of those individual challenge profiles, there are different ways to tackle them. Like, the ogre, while in a broader purpose is more of a like combat challenge, you don't have to fight the ogre. Or Granny Scrimshaw, in a broader thing, is a social challenge, but it's like you can threaten her, you can socially disgrace her, or you can get on her good side. And I think that's kind of like the big thing to take away from this, not just like the tips on how to build challenges in the system, but how challenges work in this system to give quite a bit of a narrative focus to this game. It's all about the different options that players have, not only in their character creation, but also in how their characters overcome these challenges, how they tackle them, and the also the variety of consequences that the MC can use to throw at the party whenever relevant. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Amit?
No, I mean, you just pretty much covered all the points there. It's just a lot of fun. It's super light. It's super flexible. I really enjoy running games with it. And I really enjoy writing for it, as a content creator. You could just really, you can see, you guys all saw that. You can have a lot of fun with these interactions. It's very, very flexible. And at the same time, it's totally gamified and totally interacts with the character sheets. So play with it, have fun, Go to the Discord, share your creations, make challenges, and share them with everyone.
Phenomenal. Well, to everyone who has joined us today, thank you so much for joining us. We had so much fun creating these challenges with you. As Amit said, if you want to interact more with the community and talk more about Legend of the Mist, but also if you want to talk about other Son of Oak properties like City of Mist and Otherscape, or just want to interact more with this incredible community that we've built up, feel free to join the City of Mist Discord. There's a link in the chat. There will be a link in the description. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the Legend in the Mist Kickstarter as well. There is a full Tinderbox demo at Legend in the Mist where you can go into even more of the rules and scenarios, see even more of these challenge profiles that have been officially made. Now, this game is currently in development, so these challenge profiles may look a little bit different on the official release, but there's so much interesting stuff in there, from the Wakened Sentry to the Poisoned Worm, to the actual like pawn that the Poisoned Worm represents. So you can get a much better idea of the variety that you can get in all of these challenge profiles. If you want a better look at how this system has run, you can check out our previous live streams, one of which we did a short actual play. And we also have a Legend in the Mist in action video on our YouTube channel, where more of a scripted, like, here is how a scenario goes, voiceover and edited by yours truly. Um,
Yeah, great video.
by the way, be sure to check out the rest of the channel as well. We have a ton of videos on Otherscape and City of Mist. If you want notifications for our, any upcoming live streams or just Son of Oak news in general, be sure to subscribe to our channel and check us out on our social media pages. Son of Oak is on Facebook, X/Twitter. I refuse to call it only X. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's also worth noting we are in the final stretch in the last week of this Kickstarter. If you can get out there, share it with people, talk to people about what you've seen on the stream. Um, just get it out there. Let's make the most out of this Kickstarter. We really want to unlock a lot of the stretch goals that we have prepared for you. Especially the next one is just going to be a bonus of theme cards to the two top tiers, and then an add-on if people want to add it. These cards are super popular. They always sell out when we make them for City of Mist. It's a new way of having a character sheet. We have so many other things planned for that, so definitely get out there, talk about the game, share it in your social media, share it in the forums or in other Discord channels where you chat. And yeah, we're very excited about what we're going to unlock going forward in this last week.
And speaking of unlocking, one of the stretch goals that was unlocked in the campaign is more how to play videos for Legend in the Mist.
Yes.
Those videos will be developed after the rules of Legend in the Mist are more finalized. So no clear release date on those, but because of the backers, those will be coming. So you will hear more of my beautiful voice explaining the rules of this game. Until then, be sure to follow our channels, join our Discord. We'll post news of more live streams we're doing in the past. In more live streams we're doing in the future, more videos that we'll be posting on these games. But until the next time we hear from you all,